The fluorescent lights hummed overhead as Samuel Rodriguez pushed his cleaning cart down the 42nd floor of Pinnacle Tower, the tallest building in downtown Phoenix. It was 2:30 a.m., and the city sprawled below him like a carpet of scattered diamonds against the desert darkness. Most nights, he found the solitude peaceful, after spending his days worrying about his 8-year-old daughter Maya and her mounting medical bills. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Tonight felt different. The executive offices on this floor always made him uncomfortable. Floor-to-ceiling windows, mahogany desks worth more than his annual salary, and leather chairs that probably cost more than his monthly rent. Samuel had learned not to touch anything beyond what was necessary for cleaning. Rich people noticed when things were out of place, and he couldn't afford to lose this job. As he entered the corner office belonging to David Sterling, CEO of Sterling Innovations, something caught his eye. A single sheet of paper lay on the pristine desk, handwritten in elegant script. Samuel normally wouldn't have looked twice, but the word goodbye at the top made him pause. His hands trembled as he read the carefully crafted sentences that detailed a man's decision to end his life tonight, citing the emptiness of success without meaning, the isolation of wealth, and the crushing weight of expectations that had consumed every moment of joy. At the bottom, in the same careful handwriting, David Sterling had written his final wishes for his fortune to be donated anonymously. Signed and dated for today's date, just 3 hours from now. Samuel's heart pounded. Somewhere in this building, a man was planning to die, and he was the only person who knew about it. He looked around the empty office, checking his watch. The security cameras would show him here, doing his job, but they wouldn't capture his dilemma. Should he call the police? Building security? What if he was wrong, and this was just a draft for a novel or a business simulation? But the specific references to the building's roof access, the detailed timeline, and the raw emotion bleeding through the formal language convinced him this was real. David Sterling, the billionaire whose face graced magazine covers and business journals, whose innovative software had revolutionized 3 industries, was somewhere in this tower, preparing to jump. Samuel abandoned his cart and ran toward the stairwell, his worn sneakers echoing against the polished floors. 42 floors had never seemed so high. His lungs burned as he climbed, thinking of Maya asleep in their small apartment, trusting her father to come home safely every morning. What would she do if something happened to him? But he couldn't live with himself if he didn't try to save a life, even if it belonged to someone who lived in a completely different world. Samuel burst through the roof access door, his chest heaving from the climb. The Phoenix skyline stretched endlessly in every direction, city lights twinkling like earthbound stars against the desert landscape. The wind whipped across the rooftop, carrying the scent of creosote and distant rain. Near the edge of the building, silhouetted against the neon glow of the city below, stood a tall figure in an expensive suit. "Don't come any closer," David Sterling called out without turning around. His voice carried the same authority Samuel had heard in televised interviews, but now it was hollow, defeated. "I don't know how you found me, but this doesn't concern you." Samuel stopped about 10 feet away, his hands raised peacefully. "Mr. Sterling, my name is Samuel Rodriguez. I clean your office." He spoke carefully, remembering a suicide prevention training he'd attended years ago when Maya's school had offered it to parents. "I found your note." David turned slightly, and Samuel could see the man's face was streaked with tears. Up close, without the polish of professional photography, David Sterling looked younger than his 38 years and utterly exhausted. "You should have minded your own business, Samuel Rodriguez. Maybe." Samuel agreed, taking a small step closer. "But I have a daughter, and she's taught me that sometimes we're put in places at exactly the right time for exactly the right reason." Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now, back to the story. She's 8, and she has type 1 diabetes. Do you know how many nights I've sat in hospital waiting rooms, wondering if I was going to lose the only person who matters to me? David's posture shifted slightly. his rigid stance softening just a fraction. That's different. She needs you. And maybe someone needs you too. Even if you can't see it right now. Samuel said, his voice gentle but firm. I read your note. You wrote about emptiness and isolation. I know what that feels like, Mr. Sterling. When my wife left us 3 years ago, I thought the loneliness would kill me. Some nights, after Maya went to sleep, I'd sit in our tiny kitchen and wonder if she'd be better off without me dragging her down. The wind gusted between them, and David wrapped his arms around himself. You don't understand. I have everything anyone could want, and it means nothing. I built this company from nothing, made more money than I could spend in 10 lifetimes, and for what? To sit alone in a penthouse apartment, eating takeout, and pretending the next board meeting will somehow fill the void? Samuel nodded slowly. You're right, I don't understand your world. My biggest worry is whether Maya's insulin will be covered by insurance next month, or if I can afford new school shoes before hers fall apart completely. But I understand feeling invisible, like you could disappear and nobody would really notice. Exactly, David said, his voice breaking. Do you know how long it's been since someone asked me how I was feeling, instead of what I was buying or funding or investing in? When was the last time someone looked at me and saw a person instead of a bank account? Samuel took another careful step forward. I'm looking at you right now, and I see someone in pain. Someone who climbed up here because the hurt got too heavy to carry alone. That's not a bank account, Mr. Sterling. That's a human being who deserves to keep breathing. For several long minutes they stood in silence except for the wind and the distant hum of late-night traffic 42 floors below. Samuel's phone buzzed in his pocket. Probably a text from his elderly neighbor Mrs. Chen, who watched Maya while he worked nights. She always sent updates, even though Maya slept through the night. Right now, his daughter was probably curled up with her stuffed rabbit, completely unaware that her father was on a rooftop trying to save a stranger's life. What happens now? David asked finally, turning away from the edge. If I step back, if I don't jump, what changes? I'll go back to my empty apartment, wake up tomorrow to more meetings about profits and projections, and feel exactly the same way I do right now. Samuel considered this carefully. I don't know what tomorrow looks like for you, Mr. Sterling, but I know what it looks like for me. I'll go home to my daughter, help her check her blood sugar, make her breakfast, and drive her to school in my beat-up Honda that needs new brakes. It's not glamorous, but it's real. Maybe that's what you need. Something real. David stepped back from the edge, his expensive Italian shoes scraping against the rooftop gravel. Real, he repeated, as if testing the word on his tongue. I haven't felt anything real in years. He looked at Samuel with genuine curiosity. Why did you come up here? You don't know me. For all you knew, I could have been dangerous. Samuel shrugged, stuffing his hands into the pockets of his worn work jacket. My daughter always says that good people help other people, even when it's scary. Guess I didn't want to disappoint her by being a coward. He paused, studying David's face in the dim light. Besides, dangerous people don't usually write thank you notes to their cleaning staff. A ghost of a smile crossed David's features. You notice those? Hard to miss them. Every Friday, you leave a handwritten note thanking me for keeping your office clean, with $20 cash. Most executives don't even know I exist, but you've been doing it for 8 months. Samuel shifted his weight, suddenly feeling the exhaustion from his climb. Made me wonder what kind of person you really were. David walked slowly toward the center of the roof, away from the edge. My mother taught me to notice the people who make my life better, even in small ways. She died when I was 12, but I remember her leaving cookies for the mailman every Christmas, learning the names of every store clerk we encountered. His voice grew quieter. She would be ashamed of how isolated I've become. She'd be proud that her son is still alive, Samuel said firmly. Proud that he remembered her lessons, even in his darkest moment. They stood in comfortable silence as the city pulsed below them. Samuel's phone buzzed again, and he glanced at the message from Mrs. Chen. Maya's blood sugar was perfect. She was sleeping soundly, and there was leftover soup in the refrigerator if he was hungry when he got home. Simple words that painted a picture of a life filled with small kindnesses and daily care. "Tell me about your daughter," David said suddenly. "Maya, right?" Samuel's face lit up, despite their unusual circumstances. "She's incredible. Diagnosed with diabetes 3 years ago, same week her mother walked out on us. Most kids would be bitter, but Maya just adapted. She learned to check her own blood sugar, count carbohydrates, give herself insulin injections. Never complains, even when other kids are eating birthday cake and she has to calculate if she can have a piece." "That must be expensive to manage," David observed. "Everything's expensive when you're cleaning offices for $12 an hour," Samuel admitted. "Insurance covers some of it, but there are always gaps. New glucose monitors, insulin that's not on the preferred list, emergency room visits when her levels spike. Last month, I sold my father's watch to pay for her supplies." David absorbed this information quietly. "What did you do before this job?" "I was a social worker for the county. Loved the work, helping families navigate crisis situations. But the pay was terrible, and the hours were unpredictable. When Maya got sick, I needed something with steady income and benefits, even if they weren't great." Samuel kicked at a loose piece of gravel. "Cleaning offices isn't glamorous, but it pays the bills and gives me health insurance." "Do you miss it?" "Social work. Every day," Samuel said without hesitation. "There's something powerful about being there when people need help most, about connecting resources with real human needs. But Maya comes first, always." David nodded slowly. "I started Sterling Innovations to solve problems, to make technology that would genuinely improve people's lives. Somewhere along the way it became about market share and quarterly profits instead of impact." He looked out over the city. "When did I stop caring about the actual people my software was supposed to help?" "Maybe you didn't stop caring," Samuel suggested. "Maybe you just got so focused on the big picture that you forgot to zoom in on the details. Like my daughter's teacher says, sometimes you have to look closer to see what's really important." David turned to face him fully. "You saved my life tonight, Samuel Rodriguez. I don't know how to process that, or what it means, or what I'm supposed to do now." "Right now, you're supposed to go home," Samuel said practically. "Get some sleep, eat a real meal, maybe call someone who cares about you. Tomorrow, you figure out the next step." "I don't have anyone to call," David admitted. "My parents are gone, I don't have siblings, and I can't remember the last time I had a conversation that wasn't about business." Samuel studied the man before him, seeing past the expensive suit to the loneliness underneath. "Well, you know me now. I may not have much, but I've got experience with starting over when everything falls apart." "Why would you want to help me? We're from completely different worlds." "Maybe that's exactly why," Samuel replied. "Maya's taught me that the best friendships happen when people need different things but can give each other what's missing. She's friends with kids who have 2 parents, kids who live in big houses, kids whose biggest worry is what video game to play next. Doesn't matter. They see past the differences to what's underneath." David was quiet for a long moment, processing this. "I have resources, connections, money, but I don't know how to be a friend anymore. I'm not sure I ever learned how to be one as an adult." "Friendship isn't complicated," Samuel said with a slight smile. "You show up when someone needs you, you listen when they talk, and you care about what happens to them. Maya could teach you the rest." "Your daughter sounds wise beyond her years. She's had to grow up fast. But yeah, she sees things clearly, probably because she's faced scary medical stuff and come through it stronger." Samuel glanced at his phone. "Speaking of Maya, I need to finish my shift and get home before she wakes up. She likes to see me in the morning before school, make sure I'm really okay." "Of course," David said quickly. "I've kept you from your work long enough." He hesitated, then added, "Samuel, could I ask you a favor?" "Sure. Could you not report this?" "The suicide attempt, I mean." "I know you probably should, but I need time to process what happened here tonight, to figure out how to move forward without it becoming a media circus." Samuel nodded without hesitation. "What happens on this roof stays between us. But David, if you ever feel that way again, you call me first. Deal?" David looked surprised by the easy offer of ongoing support. You'd do that? Even though we barely know each other? I'd want someone to do the same for Maya if she ever needed it, Samuel said simply. Besides, like I said, we know each other now. That means something. They exchanged phone numbers. Two men from vastly different circumstances, connected by a moment of crisis and unexpected understanding. As they walked toward the roof access door together, David seemed steadier, more grounded than he had hours earlier. Samuel, David called as they reached the stairwell. Thank you for seeing me as a person worth saving. Thank you for staying, Samuel replied. Maya's going to want to meet the man her father helped tonight. She believes in heroes, and I'd like to keep it that way. 3 months had passed since that night on the rooftop, and Samuel's life had transformed in ways he never could have imagined. What started as exchanged phone numbers had evolved into regular coffee meetings before Samuel's shifts, weekend visits where David would bring groceries and help Maya with her science projects, and quiet conversations that stretched late into the evening after Maya had fallen asleep. David had kept his word about getting help, quietly seeing a therapist and making subtle changes to his routine. He'd started taking walks instead of working through lunch, had begun reading fiction again for the first time in years, and had even adopted a rescue dog named Bruno, who seemed to sense when his owner needed companionship most. More importantly, he had found genuine purpose in his friendship with Samuel and Maya. Maya had taken to David immediately, delighting in having someone who could explain complex mathematical concepts, and who never seemed impatient when she asked endless questions about how computers worked, or why certain medications affected her blood sugar differently. David, in turn, had rediscovered the joy of seeing the world through a child's eyes, marveling at Maya's resilience and her matter-of-fact acceptance of her medical challenges. The arrangement had been working beautifully until Samuel received an envelope that changed everything. He'd been rushing to get ready for work when he noticed the official letterhead from Sterling Innovation's Human Resources Department. Inside was a formal job offer for a position as Community Outreach Coordinator, with a salary that was triple what he made as a janitor, full medical benefits that would cover all of Maya's diabetic supplies, and flexible hours that would allow him to be home when she got out of school. Samuel stared at the document, his hands trembling slightly. The position description read like it had been written specifically for him, combining his social work background with community engagement and resource coordination. It was everything he'd dreamed of since being forced to leave county services, a chance to help families while still providing stability for Maya. But something about the timing felt wrong. Samuel had never mentioned wanting to return to social work in his conversations with David, had never complained about his current job, or hinted that he needed financial help. This felt orchestrated, charitable, like David was trying to fix Samuel's life the same way he'd fix a coding problem in his software. The doubt gnawed at him throughout his shift that night. As he cleaned to David's office, he noticed details he'd missed before. The way David always seemed to have extra snacks available when Maya visited. Snacks that happened to be diabetic-friendly. The new ergonomic chair that had appeared in the break room where Samuel took his lunch breaks. The mysteriously efficient processing of Maya's insurance claims over the past few months, with approvals coming through faster than they ever had before. When David called the next morning to congratulate him on the job offer, Samuel's suspicions crystallized into anger. "Did you think I wouldn't figure it out?" Samuel asked without preamble when he answered the phone. "Figure out what?" David sounded genuinely confused. "The job, David. The perfectly crafted position that doesn't exist anywhere else in your company, with requirements that match my exact background and a salary that would solve all my financial problems. Did you think I was too stupid to realize you created it specifically for me?" There was a long pause before David responded. "Samuel, I can explain." "Explain what?" "How you've been managing my life like one of your business projects. The insurance approvals, the snacks, the convenient solutions to problems I never asked you to solve." Samuel's voice rose despite his efforts to stay calm. Maya was still sleeping, and he didn't want to wake her with this conversation. "It's not like that," David protested. "The job is real, and you're genuinely qualified for it. Your background in social work, your understanding of family crisis situations, your ability to connect with people." "My ability to be your charity case, you mean?" Samuel interrupted. "Is that what this friendship has been about? Poor single dad and his sick daughter. The perfect project for the guilty billionaire who needed to feel better about his privileged life? That's not fair, and you know it, David said, his voice sharpening. I care about you and Maya. I want to help because you matter to me, not because I see you as a charity case. Then why didn't you talk to me first? Why didn't you ask if I wanted your help before orchestrating job opportunities and pulling strings with insurance companies? Samuel paced his small kitchen, frustration building. Did it ever occur to you that I might have pride? That I might want to earn things on my own merit, instead of having them handed to me by my rich friend? Your pride isn't more important than Maya's health, David shot back. Do you have any idea how many diabetic children end up in emergency rooms because their parents can't afford proper monitoring equipment? How many families go bankrupt trying to pay for insulin? I have the resources to prevent that from happening to Maya, and you want me to just ignore it? I want you to respect me enough to include me in decisions about my own life, Samuel said, his voice deadly quiet. I've been taking care of my daughter just fine without your intervention. We may not have everything, but we have each other, and we have our dignity. Dignity doesn't pay for medical bills, David replied coldly. And it won't help Maya if her blood sugar spikes because you're too proud to accept better insurance coverage. The words hit Samuel like a physical blow. Don't you dare use my daughter against me. Don't you dare suggest that I'm putting her at risk because I won't let you play savior with our lives. I'm not playing anything, David insisted. I'm trying to be a friend, trying to use what I have to help people I care about. Isn't that what friendship is supposed to be about? Friendship is supposed to be about equality, about mutual respect, Samuel said, his voice breaking slightly. It's not supposed to be about one person deciding what's best for the other without consulting them. It's not supposed to be about fixing people like they're broken. I never said you were broken, David protested. You didn't have to say it. Every gift, every solution, every convenient coincidence has been you telling me that my life wasn't good enough as it was, that I needed you to make it better. Samuel wiped his eyes, grateful that Maya was still asleep and couldn't hear this conversation. Do you know what the worst part is? I actually believed we were friends. I thought you genuinely enjoyed spending time with us, that you saw value in our simple life. I do enjoy it, David said desperately. Some of the happiest moments I've had in years have been sitting at your kitchen table, helping Maya with homework, listening to you talk about your day. That's real, Samuel. That part was never fake. But everything else was, Samuel said flatly. The job offer, the insurance help, probably half the opportunities that have come our way recently. You've been pulling strings and manipulating circumstances while pretending to be my friend. I was trying to help, David said, his voice small. After everything you did for me that night, after how you saved my life, I wanted to give something back. I wanted to make sure you and Maya had the security and opportunities you deserved. What we deserved was honesty, Samuel replied. What we deserved was to be treated as equals in this friendship, not as your personal redemption project. There was a long silence on the line. Finally, David spoke, his voice formal and distant. I'll withdraw the job offer. I'll make sure there are no more insurance irregularities or convenient coincidences. If that's what you want. What I want is to never have needed them in the first place, Samuel said quietly. What I want is to go back to when I thought our friendship was real, before I found out it was just another business transaction for you. It was never a business transaction, David said, but Samuel had already ended the call. Maya appeared in the kitchen doorway a few minutes later, rubbing sleep from her eyes. Daddy? Why do you look sad? Samuel forced a smile, gathering his daughter into a hug. Just some grown-up stuff, sweetheart. Nothing for you to worry about. But as he helped Maya check her blood sugar and prepare her morning insulin injection, Samuel couldn't shake the feeling that he'd just lost something precious. The friendship that had given him hope for a better future, that had shown Maya what it looked like when good people supported each other, had been built on a foundation of deception and pity. Later that morning, after dropping Maya at school, Samuel found himself driving past Sterling Innovations instead of heading home to sleep before his evening shift. The building looked different now, less like a place where he'd found purpose in honest work, and more like a monument to the vast gulf between his world and David's. His phone buzzed with a text message from David. "I know you're angry, and you have every right to be, but please don't let my mistakes affect Maya's care." The insurance approvals weren't charity. They were fixing a system that was failing a child who deserves better. Samuel stared at the message for a long time before deleting it without responding. The hardest part wasn't the anger or the betrayal. It was the knowledge that David was probably right about the insurance, that Maya's health had improved dramatically over the past few months, and that going back to their previous struggles might put her at risk. But principle mattered too. Self-respect mattered. The right to make his own choices about his family's future mattered, even if those choices were harder than accepting help from a billionaire who saw him as a problem to be solved rather than a person to be respected. As Samuel drove home to his small apartment, he realized that the man he'd saved on that rooftop 3 months ago had inadvertently destroyed the life Samuel had been building for himself and Maya. The irony was bitter and complete. 6 weeks after their devastating argument, Samuel's worst fears became reality. Maya collapsed during recess at Desert View Elementary, her blood sugar having plummeted to dangerous levels despite her morning insulin routine. By the time the paramedics arrived, she was unconscious, her small body limp and unresponsive as they loaded her into the ambulance. Samuel met them at Phoenix Children's Hospital, his hands shaking as he signed consent forms and answered rapid-fire questions from the emergency room staff. Maya's glucose levels had dropped so severely that she'd slipped into diabetic ketoacidosis, a life-threatening condition that required immediate intensive care. "How long has she been having episodes like this?" Dr. Martinez asked as they stabilized Maya in the pediatric ICU. "She hasn't," Samuel said, his voice hoarse from panic. "Her levels have been stable for months. I don't understand what happened." Dr. Martinez frowned, reviewing Maya's chart on her tablet. "Her insulin prescription shows she's been using a lower-grade medication for the past month. The synthetic insulin she was on before was much more effective for severe cases like hers." Samuel's stomach dropped when the insurance company had reverted to their standard coverage after David's influence was removed. Maya's premium insulin had been deemed not medically necessary and replaced with a cheaper alternative. Samuel had questioned it, but the insurance representative had assured him the medications were equivalent. "Can we switch her back?" Samuel asked desperately. "The synthetic insulin costs about $400 per month without insurance coverage," Dr. Martinez explained gently. "I can write the prescription, but you'll need to work with your insurance company for approval, and that process can take weeks." $400 might as well have been $4,000 for Samuel. He'd already been struggling to pay for Maya's glucose testing strips after the insurance changes, picking up extra weekend shifts at a second cleaning company just to make ends meet. "Do what you need to do to keep her stable," Samuel said, knowing he had no choice. "I'll figure out the payment." Over the next 3 days, as Maya drifted in and out of consciousness, Samuel watched their medical bills climb beyond anything he could manage. The ICU stay, the specialized monitoring, the emergency medications. Each item added hundreds or thousands of dollars to a total that already exceeded his annual income. On Thursday afternoon, as Samuel sat beside Maya's bed reading to her unconscious form, his phone rang. Rebecca, his ex-wife, was calling for the first time in over a year. "I heard about Maya," Rebecca said without preamble. "I'm flying in tonight." Samuel closed his eyes, exhaustion making it hard to process this new complication. "She's stable now. You don't need to come." "She's my daughter too, Samuel, and from what I've been told, she's in the hospital because you can't afford proper medical care." The accusation hit like a physical blow. "That's not fair, Rebecca. I've been managing her diabetes perfectly fine for 3 years while you were off finding yourself in California." "Managing it into a diabetic coma, apparently," Rebecca replied coldly. "I've remarried, Samuel. My husband has excellent insurance through his law firm. Maya should be with us, where she can get the care she needs." Samuel felt the walls closing in around him. Rebecca had abandoned them when Maya's diagnosis made their life complicated. But now she was positioning herself as the responsible parent, while he looked like a failure who couldn't provide for his daughter's basic medical needs. "You can't just show up and take her," Samuel said, though he wasn't entirely sure that was true. "Watch me," Rebecca replied. "I'm filing for emergency custody. Maya deserves better than what you can give her." After Rebecca hung up, Samuel stared at his reflection in the darkened hospital window. 3 years of single parenting, of sacrifice and struggle and small victories, might all be erased because he'd been too proud to accept help from the one person who could have prevented this crisis. That evening, as Samuel sat in the hospital cafeteria trying to force down a sandwich he couldn't afford, someone slid into the seat across from him. He looked up to find David Sterling, looking haggard and concerned, still wearing his business suit but with his tie loosened and his usually perfect hair disheveled. "How did you know?" Samuel asked quietly. "Grace, my assistant, monitors news about diabetic emergencies in Phoenix. She knows about Maya." David's voice was careful, uncertain. "I came as soon as I heard." Samuel wanted to be angry, to tell David to leave, to maintain the walls he'd built between them. But sitting in this sterile cafeteria, facing the possibility of losing Maya forever, his pride felt like a luxury he could no longer afford. "She's stable now," Samuel said instead. "They think she'll be okay, but the bills—" He trailed off, unable to voice the impossibility of the situation. "I know about Rebecca," David said quietly. "I know she's filing for emergency custody." Samuel's head snapped up. "How could you possibly know that?" "Because she called me," David admitted. "She somehow found out about our friendship and wanted to know if I'd testify about your financial situation, about how you couldn't provide adequate care for Maya." "And will you?" Samuel asked, his voice barely above a whisper. David looked shocked. "Of course not. I told her she was wrong about you, that you're the most devoted father I've ever known, and that if Maya was in crisis it wasn't because of anything you did or didn't do." Samuel felt tears threatening for the first time since Maya's collapse. "Why would you defend me, after how I treated you, after the things I said?" "Because you were right," David said simply. "You were right about everything. I did overstep. I did try to manage your life, instead of respecting your choices. I turned our friendship into a charity project because that's what I'm used to doing, throwing money at problems instead of actually understanding them." "David, Let me finish," David interrupted gently. "I've spent the last 6 weeks in therapy trying to understand why I handled things so badly. My therapist helped me realize that I was so desperate for real connection, so grateful for what you'd given me that night on the roof, that I confused gratitude with friendship. I tried to repay you instead of just being present with you." Samuel wiped his eyes, overwhelmed by the honesty in David's words. "I was scared," he admitted. "Scared that if I accepted your help, I'd lose myself, lose my independence. I've been poor before, David, but I've never been helpless. And your solutions made me feel helpless." "I understand that now," David said. "And I'm not here to offer solutions or try to fix anything. I'm here because Maya is fighting for her life, and you shouldn't have to face that alone." They sat in silence for several minutes, the weight of their mutual understanding settling between them. Finally, Samuel spoke. "Rebecca's right about one thing. I can't afford the insulin Maya needs. Even if she recovers completely, I can't guarantee this won't happen again. What if there was a way to handle the medical costs without it being charity?" David asked carefully. "What if it was structured as a loan, or a payment plan, something that preserved your autonomy while ensuring Maya gets what she needs?" Samuel considered this. "What did you have in mind?" "Sterling Innovations has a scholarship program for children of employees. It covers medical expenses, educational costs, whatever the family needs. The catch is, it requires a parent to work for the company." David paused. "That job offer I made before was real, Samuel. The position exists, the salary is fair market value, and you're genuinely qualified for it. It wasn't charity then, and it isn't charity now. But you created it for me specifically," Samuel pointed out. "Yes," David admitted, "but I created it because I saw a need in our company for someone with your skills and background. We've been struggling to connect our technology with actual community impact. You could bridge that gap in a way no one else could." Samuel looked through the cafeteria windows toward the pediatric ICU, where Maya lay connected to machines that were keeping her stable. What would the position actually involve? working with local organizations to identify how Sterling's technology could address real community needs, developing partnerships with schools, hospitals, social service agencies, using your social work background to help us create programs that actually serve families instead of just generating good publicity. It sounded like meaningful work, the kind of impact Samuel had dreamed of making when he'd first become a social worker. And the medical coverage? Full family coverage, including all diabetes management costs. Not as a favor, but as part of the employee benefits package that everyone at your level receives. Samuel closed his eyes, feeling the weight of the decision. Accepting meant swallowing his pride and admitting he needed help. Refusing meant potentially losing Maya to Rebecca's custody petition, meant watching his daughter suffer because of his stubbornness. There's something else, David continued. Rebecca's custody petition is scheduled for next week. She's arguing that you can't provide stable medical care for Maya. If you were employed by Sterling Innovations with full medical benefits, it would undermine her entire case. You'd do that? Samuel asked. Hire me to help me keep Maya? I'd hire you because you're qualified, and because we need someone with your perspective, David corrected. The fact that it helps you keep your daughter is just a benefit, not the motivation. Samuel studied David's face, looking for signs of pity or condescension, but found only genuine respect and concern. If I take this job, we do it professionally. No special treatment, no behind-the-scenes management of my life. I succeed or fail on my own merit. Absolutely, David agreed. Though I reserve the right to be your friend outside of work hours, if you'll have me. For the first time in days, Samuel managed a small smile. Maya's going to want to hear all about Bruno when she wakes up. She's been asking about him. He's been moping since you both disappeared from our lives, David admitted. Dogs know when something's wrong, even when humans are too stubborn to admit it. As if summoned by their conversation, Samuel's phone buzzed with a text from Maya's nurse. She was awake and asking for her father. Samuel stood quickly, David following. Together? David asked. Samuel nodded, realizing that some battles were too important to fight alone, and some pride too costly to maintain. As they walked toward the ICU, Samuel felt something he hadn't experienced in weeks. Hope that Maya would not only survive this crisis, but that they might all emerge from it stronger than before. 1 year later, Samuel stood in the conference room at Sterling Innovations, presenting his quarterly community impact report to the board of directors. The room was filled with executives who had once seemed impossibly distant, but now listened intently as he outlined the success of their partnership with Phoenix Children's Hospital to provide free glucose monitoring systems to low-income families. Maya sat in the back of the room, quietly working on homework during her after-school visit to Samuel's office. Her health had stabilized completely on the premium insulin, and she'd become something of a mascot around Sterling Innovations, charming employees with her curiosity about their work and her matter-of-fact explanations of managing diabetes. The Desert Hope Initiative has reached over 300 families this year, Samuel continued, clicking to the next slide. We've prevented an estimated 40 emergency hospital visits and saved the healthcare system approximately $2 million in crisis intervention costs. David, sitting at the far end of the conference table, caught Samuel's eye and smiled. Their friendship had evolved into something more balanced and genuine than either had experienced before. David still struggled with his instinct to solve problems with money, but he'd learned to ask before offering solutions. Samuel had gradually become more comfortable accepting help when it was offered respectfully and without strings attached. The custody battle with Rebecca had been resolved 6 months ago. The judge had been impressed with Samuel's stable employment, comprehensive insurance coverage, and Maya's dramatically improved health outcomes. Rebecca had ultimately withdrawn her petition, admitting that she wasn't prepared for the daily reality of managing a child's chronic illness. She visited Maya twice a month now, an arrangement that worked better for everyone involved. After the board meeting concluded, Samuel found David and Maya in his office, engaged in their weekly chess game. Maya had become a formidable opponent, much to David's delight and occasional frustration. "Checkmate, Mr. David," Maya announced triumphantly. "You left your king exposed again." "I keep forgetting you inherited your father's strategic mind," David laughed. studying the board. "One more game?" "Homework first," Samuel interjected, ruffling his daughter's hair. "You can finish conquering David's ego after you complete your math assignment." As Maya settled at the small desk David had installed in Samuel's office specifically for her visits, the two men stepped onto the balcony overlooking downtown Phoenix. The city stretched endlessly toward the desert mountains, painted gold by the setting sun. "The board was impressed with your presentation today," David said. "Johnson mentioned that the community programs have generated more positive media coverage than our last 3 product launches combined." "It helps when the programs actually make a difference in people's lives," Samuel replied. "Amazing how much good publicity you get when you solve real problems instead of manufactured ones." They stood in comfortable silence, watching the traffic below. Their friendship had taught them both valuable lessons about vulnerability and authenticity. David had learned that genuine connection required more than financial generosity, while Samuel had discovered that accepting help didn't diminish his worth as a person or a father. "Maya wants to invite you to her science fair next month," Samuel said. "She's doing a project on how technology can improve medical care for children." "Inspired by her own experience?" David asked. "Inspired by watching her father find work that matters to him," Samuel corrected. "She understands now that the best solutions come from people who've lived through the problems themselves." Maya appeared in the doorway, homework completed with her characteristic efficiency. "Dad, can Mr. David come to dinner Sunday? Mrs. Chen is making her famous tamales, and Bruno needs to play with the neighborhood dogs." "If Mr. David doesn't have more important plans," Samuel said, though he already knew the answer. "Nothing more important than tamales and dog play dates," David confirmed, earning a grin from Maya. As they prepared to leave the office, Maya tugged on David's sleeve. "Mr. David, remember that night you told me about being sad and scared, and how Dad helped you feel better?" David looked surprised. Samuel had never shared the details of that rooftop encounter, maintaining the privacy they'd agreed upon. "What about it, sweetheart?" "I'm glad Dad found your note," Maya said simply, "because now we're all family, and families take care of each other." David knelt to Maya's level, his eyes bright with unshed tears. "Yes, we are family. And yes, we do take care of each other." Samuel watched the exchange with deep satisfaction. They had indeed become a family, not through blood or marriage, but through choice and commitment, and the daily decision to show up for each other. David's wealth had made their lives easier, but it was the emotional investment that had made them complete. The 3 of them walked through the Sterling Innovations lobby together, past the portrait wall featuring David's various business achievements. Samuel still sometimes marveled at the journey that had brought them here, from that desperate night on the rooftop to this moment of quiet contentment. "Hey, David," Samuel said as they reached the parking garage. "Thank you for staying that night, for giving us both a chance at something better." "Thank you for seeing me as worth saving," David replied. "For showing me what real family looks like." Maya, walking between them, took both their hands. "Come on, guys. Mrs. Chen's expecting us for dinner planning, and Bruno's probably wondering where we are." As they headed home together, Samuel reflected on how dramatically their lives had changed. He'd set out to save one man's life and ended up transforming all of them. Sometimes the best families weren't the ones you were born into, but the ones you built through love, courage, and the willingness to be vulnerable with the right people. The future stretched ahead of them, full of possibilities they would face together. Maya's laughter echoed through the parking garage as David told an elaborate story about Bruno's latest adventure. And Samuel knew with absolute certainty that they had found something precious and permanent in each other. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.